All right. We are live and this is fun. Now, this is something that I've been promising to do for a long time is to do more live streams and engage, as they say, and have a little good, clean fun. I'm going to tell you tonight, along with a couple of friends of mine who I'm going to introduce in just a second, how not to be a guest on TV. So I've been invited on to different shows. A lot of them are international. To explain geopolitics, to explain things like Donald Trump, because in Europe they're like, so tell me about that. How does that work? So you can be like a convicted sex offender rapist, and people want you to run the country. And you know, they want to know, well, if your dog catcher is a sex offender, would you vote for that dog catcher? I said, not in the United States, but president, that's different. So anyway, as we all know, well, let me just bring on my friends here. These are long lost friends, and one is a new friend. Long lost is Rory Penland, whom I knew back in the days of Tampa some years ago. We're not going to say how many. Let's just say sufficient years ago.
Back when we were tampons.
There was something called cable TV back then, and it required something called a TV back then, and cable, and junction boxes and hubs, and they would distribute it through a satellite. And you had a remote control and you paid $150 a month to watch the TV. What a bargain. And so I knew Rory from back then. And he has in his quiver of cool people on the planet, Renee. Renee not only has a keen legal mind, but she also has a zeitgeist doppelganger who is a Ukrainian woman who happens to be part of her. I mean, I can't explain it, but she probably can better. Renee, I want to welcome you.
Yes, Irina, I defected. I was in love with Daddy Putin for a long time. People know, but he doesn't do right by people from Ukraine. Did not do right by me. Never gave me keys to palace. So now I have defected. I am proud Ukrainian woman. So, Slava Ukraina.
You know what I'd like to do? So we're going to get into it in a minute, but when you get invited on some of these shows, RT is one that some Americans might remember. A lot of people, we've never heard of RT, but it is the Russian news network. So let's just call it state TV, though they will tell you, oh no, we're independent. It's kind of like if you're watching Fox or Newsmax or OANN, One News, whatever these things are, or CNN, admittedly, or MSNBC, which is the invert of Fox. So you're watching Fox, you're like, where in the fuck did they come up with this stuff? Then you watch MSNBC. At least it used to be fact-based. Now they throw in a hefty amount of opinion. And so really the two places you would go for something that might be akin to what you actually are interested in are like so extreme, they're impossible. That leaves you sort of CNN, which is supposed to be kind of the middle. Well, the Russians have a network. The Russians reach 800 million people on this RT channel, and they distribute it. It used to be on all U.S. cable systems once upon a time. This is just before the invasion 2 years ago. So you could get it here. You could get it on DirecTV. You could get it on Roku, on your Amazon Fire Stick. So it was kind of a big deal. And I was one of the other people because I do mornings in LA on public radio, as many of you know. Some of you are subscribers, this, that. And they wanted to get, this guy who's in LA to talk about what's going on in the world. But the Russians, you see, they have a political appetite. They won't admit it, but they wanted me to just beat the hell out of the United States. And I happen to, I know, like the United States. Why? Because I'm American. But more than that, it's not a jingoistic hard-on here. It's my ancestors are founding fathers of this country. I have a grandfather clock in the other room, over 300 years old. It still keeps good time with giant weights and leads and pendulums. Signers of the Declaration of Independence against Fat King George III. We came over on the Mayflower. On my mother's side is Abraham Lincoln. I'm from Illinois. Abraham Lincoln is my ancestor, as is likewise Benedict Arnold. You don't get to have it all.
You're always at odds with yourself, Cary. You can never really.
God, it's so true.
You're just always beating up on yourself. It's crazy.
It starts to get hard and then it's flaccid again. It's just, it doesn't really work.
You just You gotta keep
The
spanking.
Benedict Arnold side is on one shoulder going, hey, maybe we should talk to those Russians again.
Well, interesting story about Benedict Arnold, and I'm not here to defend Benedict Arnold, but back then in the days of the early colonies, there was no, the United States was like an idea. We were still Englishmen. Yes, we were Englishmen, and the king owned you. You were property of the crown. There isn't this fake citizenship that the British think they have today. Oh my God, AI. It just jumped in on that shot. That's fright. Oh my God. Did I say King Charles? Does that bring balloons?
I'm sorry. It happened to you when you were in It's Casual too.
Yes.
Let me
do this. Balloons.
It was
King
exciting
Charles.
to see you, Cary. Look at that.
Right. Okay. So my train of thought now having derailed all over the tracks. There's kindling, there's fires, bodies burning everywhere. So I have no idea. What were we talking about?
You were sticking up for Benedict Arnold.
Benedict Arnold side.
So back in early American history, as we were looking to become Americans, we had what were called militias. This is the Second Amendment. And this is what the Second Amendment is about. It has nothing to do with bump stocks and AR-15s. It says a well-regulated militia, period. Not Timmy gets to have a gun collection that's 500 fucking machine guns at home, and then he can go out and spray the schoolyard as he wishes if he's white. Because when he's white, we hear the same thing. He was having a bad day. Now you have a black man go out and spray the field with bullets, not having a bad day, but he's going to have one, that's for sure. So the Second Amendment was having a well-regulated militia. Regulated means one of two things. So if you rent a U-Haul, it has a regulator. A regulator means it won't go past 64 miles an hour, and it won't maybe go too slow either. So it regulates the speed. It regulates the amount of gas, the amount of oil, like an engine, a combustion engine. So well-regulated militia meant one of two things. One, it had enough ammo, and it also meant it had some rules. Like when you're done, you put your gun back in the armory. Oh. Why would you have an armory? Well, you're using gunpowder back then. And when gunpowder gets wet, it simply doesn't work. So they keep an armory with all the gunpowder and guns. It was only in the 1870s when Smith & Wesson, a name that we've grown to cook with and love for guns, came up with these more automated handguns, revolvers, things of that nature. And our Supreme Court, which gets confirmed by the Senate had been well lubricated by the gold rush and such. And Smith & Wesson, now the National Rifle Association, as we all know, is the largest lobbying organization in America. And so they wanted to release these guns all over the street. Who's to say no to that? And with that, they made a decision that actually the Second Amendment means you're supposed to have machine guns, automatic weaponry, and use them to defend yourself hundreds of miles away from people you will never meet or even see. So here we are today. I'm sorry about that. I went on a long rabbit hole.
Say, speaking about militia, Waco proved, I mean, what kind of an actual militia to defend yourself against the government intruding on you do we have to have? What level? Because Waco was well stocked 20 years ago. So I'm always wondering, that's my question. No one can ever really give me an answer.
Well, what was the question?
How like the original militias, you actually might be able to defend yourself against the initial government, right?
Yeah.
What can you do now against the United States military if they were intruding and impinging upon your actual?
Nothing. Now you've got drones.
Yeah.
You could see through rock in 3D. You're screwed. But really, a militia, if we look at it, what is it really today? What it really is, it's club membership. It's a private, almost a cult-like experience. Yeah, it's just a fan club. And then when they come and get you, well, you go down in a blaze of glory. So
just like Bon Jovi.
Just like Bon Jovi. That's exactly right. Bon Jovi. So Iran, is it Irana?
Irina. Thank you.
Irina. So let me show you this because I know you have a deep, deep affection for the Russians, as you would being Ukrainian.
Used to. Yeah. So we have defected now.
And, Vlad, as we know, is looking to rebuild the Soviet Union. We know this from the webinars that I used to do during COVID, where I had on a guy who literally we found out was a former KGB agent and living in Mexico and is, rebuilding Russians everywhere, and said he had reported to Putin directly. Turns out that rebuilding the Soviet Union, taking all the satellite countries, bringing them back into the mothership, whether it becomes Soviet or becomes stylized or marketed as something else, it becomes basically the same thing. You control the oil, the food supply, etc. So RT, part of its job is nothing more than propaganda, baby. And they find these MAGA lunatics all over the US that are willing to just trash the shit out of anything American. This is a good line of thought. What do we do when our government or military has turned on us? What a great question. And we'll get to that in a second, because there's actually run, go to the basement, eat ice cream. Really, it's beyond that. And I know that is the popular argument of why we're supposed to be carrying guns. So the militia was because we didn't have a national army back then. Because we weren't a nation yet. So we had militias, and Congress was supposed to come up with a little money, and George Washington was supposed to pay the militias, and he didn't. Getting back to who's the traitor? Benedict Arnold, my ancestor. Yes. So Benedict Arnold was living large, baby. He had a giant house in Philadelphia. He had servants. He was living great. He was owed a lot of money by George Washington. George didn't have the money because Congress wouldn't release it. Kind of like the Congress of today. Screwed. So what does he do? The English say, look, you know where all the bodies are buried. You know this guy, George. You know what the plan is. The king is going to compensate and pay you. He's going to cover your rent, your mortgage, your dog food, et cetera, et cetera. Come work for us. He was so far in debt, and they did have debtors' prisons back then. Remember, that's in our Constitution. No debtors' prisons. Back then, debtors' prisons. So he joined the British. And that's
not
why
going to get out of that with a ball and musket. That's for sure.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to play you a clip of propaganda. This is RT. This was a giant Russian network. It's still out there right now, banned in the US, not available, but you can find it if you just go online on a browser. So they had me on, and they had me sparring with a libertarian, thinking that I was going to sit there and just, pat him on the fanny and say, you're absolutely right. So it was my last. I had done probably 6 of these appearances before. But I was trying to walk this middle line and make it work. So let's take a peek, and then you guys can just tear it up. Just tear it up afterwards. Here we go.
For more, we're going to go live now to radio host Cary Harrison and Steve Gill, radio host and political commentator. Welcome you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Steve, if we can start with you, actually. So Oxford authorities claim the initiative of stopping drivers from using busy routes in peak hours is aimed at helping both the economy and the environment. Do you think this is the way forward? Will it be worth the inconvenience for drivers?
Well, when people can't get to the businesses there, I'm not sure how that's going to help the economy. And as the commentator pointed out, we used to always get the excuse for every public policy argument that it's for the children. Now it's always for the environment. In Japanese, there are 2 words for truth. There's hone and tatamai. One is truth and one is the real truth. And unfortunately, I think bureaucratic governments all over the world tell a truth, but don't really tell the truth of what the purpose of this agenda really is. And I think that's why people are skeptical of it.
Well, Cary, I mean, the move has caused quite a stir, with some critics saying it's a suicidal experiment leading to a complete dystopia. Do you agree with that assessment?
That is the most dramatic thing I have heard in probably 2.5 weeks. When I moved to Los Angeles 20 years ago, the air was unbreathable. The traffic congestion is still absolutely impossible, making the city unlivable. 10-lane freeways, no public transportation, nowhere to go. Do people stop driving? Yes. Do they stop hanging out and visiting? Yes. Are there parking spaces available? No. So what has happened is people have gotten Vespas and bicycles. I know it's a radical idea in Los Angeles. You're not going to see the Kardashians on one, but for the first time ever, people will actually go and have lunch together. It seems like a radical idea, but if you like clean air, If you like to be an upright being that is able to get from A to B comfortably without being smacked by a car, sometimes you might have to limit it. We can remember historically how this came to be. In the 1920s, Los Angeles had the finest public transportation in the world. Rewatch the movie Chinatown. You'll see evidence of that. Cable cars, trolleys going from downtown to the ocean in 10 minutes for a nickel. Unbelievable. Then in the 1950s and 60s, General Motors, that makes automobiles, Firestone, that makes 4 rubber tires per automobile, got together, paid off the city council, pulled all of the public transportation out of LA, and now we're stuck with multiple lanes, 14 million vehicles, all to go across 36 little cities with no town hall, nowhere to go, and it's pretty horrible for people.
Well, Steve, I mean, to counter that, local residents will have to apply for a permit to drive through the filters on as many as 100 days per year. How is the idea of such restrictions compatible with the principles of basic human rights, such as the freedom of movement?
Well, first of all, I don't think people are just getting in their cars and driving at random. Most of them are going somewhere. They're going to work. They're dropping their kids off at school. They're going to meetings. And I would argue that in LA, when they had 10-minute trolley rides for a very low amount, it's because people were living in a relatively compressed area. And in LA now, where you have people living 20, 30 miles out of towns, the suburbs have grown dramatically. When you're an hour or so drive from downtown, you can get on your bike all day, but it's going to take you 2 or 3 hours to get to town, 2 or 3 hours to get out of town. That's not a workable system any more than in Oxford, when you have a town that was built hundreds of years ago with narrow streets. It was not anticipating vehicles. You're going to have to deal with the reality of an old town with small confines and with people wanting to get in and out of those areas for work and business and to take their kids to school. You got to deal with the reality, not the idea that we can put trolleys in or some sort of a monorail system like Disney World and move people around rapidly on a relatively easy schedule.
Well, Cary, don't you think that the Western democracies have somewhat over-focused on the Go Green agenda, already crossing the boundaries of rationality? Some critics would argue this, and some critics would also argue that protecting the environment is just a cover-up for introducing more control and surveillance over people.
If that were the reason, and we could discover that, absolutely, I would be right there with everyone else, pulling my sword from its scabbard. That would be outrageous, but we don't have evidence of that. Oxford, going back to about 1145, when the Castle of Oxford was built, there were horses, people on foot. Look at Europe with its beautiful public transportation. Zurich, one of the top 2 places on earth to live, with unbelievable systems. If, in fact, this is where they want to go and create a quality of life that surpasses everyone, then that's a good thing for the upright mammals that live there, especially people that want to shop there. If I can't get my car down a cobblestone street and can't park it reasonably or be able to afford to park it, I'm not going to go. I'm going to use Amazon.
Well, Steve, while the West urges the world to go green, it does not refrain from opening coal mines, for instance, like we've seen in the UK recently. Don't you?
Anyway, I didn't realize that the Russians ran that one so long, but you get an idea that what they want to do is really get rid of anything that we would find necessary, like having any kind of logic in the way we live, clean air. And the idea is to pit Americans against Americans. And that's the way they do propaganda.
Right.
And it's pretty fabulous, but you don't get invited back in because, as you can see, I'm arguing on behalf of like fucking logic and common sense. Am I allowed to say that? Common sense without getting bleeped?
Yeah, this is not a Russian network. So yeah, you're not going to get bleeped here for
We
that.
cut ties with Putin at least 7 months ago. So
Yes. Well, I'm glad.
yeah, we're at least 7 months out. But this is talking about Oxford,
the mic could
England,
afford.
correct? This was talking about.
I think my mic was muted, so I apologize for that. You probably didn't hear some of the greatest soliloquy I've ever done on mute. There it is. David, yes, you're right. We can't use common sense around here. That seems to be the key thing that's missing in everything. Is people have incredible skill sets in this country. You know, they can write code. They can short sell on Wall Street. They can do these amazing things, but no common sense at all. Like, how are you going to get there? How are you going to get from the Upper West Side down to Wall Street? Oh, well, shit, we're going to get rid of the public transportation because these libertarians don't want to pay for my subway that they're not going to use. So I'm supposed to get there by a car. And Manhattan needs more car. It craves it. Congested cities crave more vehicles. Don't you think?
That's what I've been saying for years. No one wants to listen to me. You know, the go green is just overstating everything. The go green, what did she say? The go green is just, it's way out of control. Even though giant squid, who are the most reclusive animals on the planet, just about have been found to have in their system all kinds of pollutants, from flame retardants to all of this, all of the crazy stuff that we put around, all these chemicals. And yet the most isolated creatures on the planet, like the giant squid, can actually be retaining that. That means that we are all in trouble because the world is so interconnected, right? So the fact that she's saying, and I've heard people say this, oh, you're overblowing everything. We are so far beyond. What's the doomsday clock? What is it? 90 seconds to midnight?
90 seconds right now. The doomsday clock was started by Albert Einstein, and it was a make-believe clock of how many minutes till midnight. Midnight was full-on global thermonuclear war, end of all life as we know it. It's now 90 seconds to midnight. We're at this disaster zone. And to your point, Renee, we look into the Pacific Ocean, and there are two gyres, they're called. They're counter-rotating plastic islands, not solid, but just so much garbage, so many empty 1 liter, 2 liter Coke bottles, everybody's, bags from the grocery store, that they are the size of Texas. You could see them by satellite, counter-rotating in the Pacific. Every time there's a nice storm, of which climate change, again, these over the top, let's not get too serious about climate change here, as California has a wildfire every Thursday at 4:00. So these gyres are spinning. You get these Pacific hurricanes. It smashes the plastic. It breaks down into tiny little microparticles that flicker through the water. What do fish see? Food, baby. And they eat that plastic. You eat the fish. You have plastic in you. And let me tell you, your body is not craving plastic, especially when it starts to erode and leach BPH and other things into your bloodstream, which causes wild genetic anomalies. And that's just the beginning. That's just one fish stick.
And the fact that now they don't even know what synthetic means anymore because there are plastic rocks. Plastic has actually burrowed so deep into our molecular structure of the Earth, of the entire planet, that scientists are saying, what does synthetic even mean anymore? And what does plastic mean anymore, since it's merging with organic materials? What is organic? We don't even know anymore, because that stuff has just infiltrated every single cell of every being. That's shocking to me. And I don't think we're upset enough. I don't think we're freaked out enough.
No. I mean, in Europe, they take it seriously because I mentioned Zurich in the video earlier. You can go in Switzerland to a lake like in Lucerne, which is sort of in the middle, and you can literally lean over like Lassie and lap out of the lake. Even though there's boats in it, it's clean water.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And the Europeans have this thing, and so did the British, by the way, back when we used to be part of England. You can't piss in the king's water because it's the king's water, which means it's everyone's water. And that's what the commons are. That's why we have the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, or the commons. We call them parks, but they're places where I can't go in and destroy the park because I want to build a factory in the center of it. It actually belongs to all of us. But we've been trained in the last 100 years that the idea of a public park is communism. A public park breeds communists.
And you have to have that accent when you say communism, too.
Well, you do. And you gotta have like drop out a tooth or two. Because you see, when you argue politics with this accent, sound a little like Miss Lindsey Graham, or Lady G, as we call her in Washington, D.C.
Washington. Thank you for the R. Washington.
I know. It's the madness. So to sort of answer the question that was asked earlier is, like, seriously, what are we supposed to do here in the United States now? Everything is upside down. The least intelligent people are running things. It's insane.
Yeah, it is. It is. What was the case now? Now, just give us a little bit of context. That's what I was asking earlier about the RT that you showed a little bit earlier. They're talking about Oxford. Are they talking about Oxford, England?
Yes, Oxford, England. So Oxford, England has, it's ancient, 1100s, cobblestone streets. It can only hold so many cars. And so the city of Oxford, which it's called a democracy, the people in a place will decide how they want a town to work.
Right.
So the people in the place decided, let's get rid of a lot of those cars, make it more pedestrian, and build public transportation. So you can shove them all on there. They can go back and forth, but we're not going to have endless millions of cars blowing exhaust up the windows and just traffic jams and hell a nightmare. And
let me just interject for a second. I studied at Oxford. That's why I wanted to make clear. I actually studied at Oxford. I lived there. There's absolutely no reason I can think of or fathom in my entire psyche of why someone would need more cars to have access. It's a walkable city. It connects to other, you just walk everywhere. And then they have an amazing bus system. There's a bus every, 80 seconds probably.
But Steve Gill wants to buy a Porsche in that video when I was on RT. Clearly, he needs to have a fast car to go all of it's like LA. You go 3-4 miles an hour on a 10-lane freeway that's backed up 100 miles. But you're the guy in the Porsche, and everyone looks. They don't know who you are. They'll never meet you, but they're jealous.
Exactly. That's what it comes down to,
And I wanted to interject about LA being. They were talking about LA, and the old joke was knock knock, who's there? UCLA when the smog clears, right? And do you remember in 2020 when they did shut down automobiles in LA, and the skies were the bluest they had ever been there? They cleared up. The same thing happened in 2008 with the Beijing Olympics. The smog there was so bad it was actually interfering with the visiting athletes who had come there, and they had to shut down all automobile for like several days during the Olympics. And again, the skies cleared up, and but with LA, can you do an underground subway system?
We do have one. We do have one in the last number of minutes of this. This is a cool experiment. We're going to do more thanks to the capacious brain mass that sits in the head of Renee and the wild humor.
Capacious is the word that I get. When I walk down the street, people yell capacious, capacious. Thank you for getting that.
I would go for rapacious possibly, or any other acious, but capacious, unless they say which part. Yes.
Look down here. Look at my tagline. Cary, why do I have this as my tagline? Do you want to tell people who are just being introduced? You see, Cary's new best friend.
Okay, it's all
which
true.
Everybody out here is Cary's new best friend, right? Cary, that's one of your.
He likes capacious.
It's very true. Yes.
All right.
So circling back, was it William? There it is. Was talking
David.
Sorry. The FDA being there really as a shill to make industry look good. Well, it was started by Richard Milhouse Nixon, the FDA, of all, who died a statesman. This is Tricky Dick. This is the Richard Nixon. But he realized that he wanted to have a legacy other than just bile and pus and hatred. So he gave us the FDA. He gave us OSHA. So if your arm gets sawed off at the factory, you'll get a nickel and maybe some cat food for at least a couple of weeks.
After a long delay of red tape, yes.
Yeah. And
eventually
gave us some other things that today are kind of going away and being dismantled, but they're pretty radical things. So, it's there, and it's actually done good. Because of the EPA, we are able to have a small confidence that the food supply isn't totally rancorous. Sure, GMOs are everywhere. Like 97% of all soy is GMO. And cleverly, Monsanto, Novartis, these other companies will take a biplane, and you see, say, out in the middle of Wisconsin, a biplane spreading fertilizer from the air all over the corn crops. Well, they actually spread GMO corn seeds in regular private farmers' corn stalks. And
yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. That's been documented. That's not conspiracy theory. That's actually true.
Yeah. So permanent ruination of natural corn. Now you need to buy GMO corn, which requires 5 times as much water, twice as much fertilizer, and the seeds die every year, and the corn doesn't make new corn. It's sterile on purpose. So now you have to be a customer as a farmer. Rain and sun, forget it. You got to pay to grow what used to grow normally and naturally. And this is the crucible that we all find ourselves in with these questions we're all asking here. Look right on the screen there is, what the hell do we do about it? And here's the good news. The good news is it only takes 15%, 15% of any of us to ask enough questions to ruin the margins of the ones making the profit being naughty. I'll give you an example. Rory, you'll remember cornflakes, whether it's Post or Raisin Bran, had high fructose corn syrup for years. You didn't think twice about it, right? But then you started to hear, I don't know what that stuff is, but I hear it's bad. I hear it's bad. Here's how bad it is. Your body processes high fructose corn syrup. It's like 10 times as sweet as regular sugar. Your liver receives it like it's alcohol. It causes cirrhosis of the liver, diabetes type 2. It's very naughty. Let's just face it. And so about 15% of America, not a huge bunch, just heard it was bad, weren't sure why, so they stopped buying it. That was enough for the cereal companies to pull it, throw a big label across the top of the boxes that says contains no high fructose corn syrup. And guess what? They started selling Raisin Bran like hotcakes again. And so 15%, that's all we need to do in this country is get 15% of us to like be on the same page, because MAGA, that's 30% of America. They're on the same page and they dress up as elk and storm the Capitol building as fucking elk. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any ingredients for most products today, there's about 35 different names for different types of sugar, and you're going to find at least 4 of those names in an ingredient list because of the sugar lobbyists on most goods, most processed foods. And again,
that's right.
And high fructose corn syrup is one of them. You know,
and
that's just
it's
one
cheap
of the
to
many.
make. It's like super cheap to make. You could put it in everything. It's ubiquitous, everything from, Coca-Cola to whatever. And in this country, we put sugar in almost every product, unlike people who have grandparents that came from Italy or people who've been to Europe a few times. Their food tastes weird. You know what their food tastes like in Europe? Food. Whatever that tastes like.
My guess.
But we put sugar in our tomato paste for spaghetti sauce. It's in literally everything. So we're constantly getting sugar. No wonder we crave the stuff. If you have ice cream,
type 2 diabetes is rampant.
Yeah.
And of course, we all know that's medication from the pharmaceutical companies that you're going to buy every month to keep it in check until you get to insulin.
Until you work your way up to insulin.
Exactly.
And then it's injectable insulin. And then you get an insulin pump. And then your insurance company says, well, that's experimental. We're not going to cover it.
Exactly.
Well, we are regrettably out of time. I have loved this. We're going to do it more, but let me let you guys give a little love to yourselves so that we know who my new best friends are here.
Well, I have the tagline that says I'm your new best friend. So
Yes.
that's official. That you
Yes, it
cannot,
is.
it's on the internet. It's already on YouTube. It means it's official. Which doesn't, you're so lucky. You're the only one who gets
Lucky.
this.
Listen, I am screwed. AI is up my ass here. I
Well,
can't.
that's what we're going to talk about next time. We're going to talk about some AI
We're going
next
to do
time.
AI next time because it has invaded my life because of, I think, public radio. It's like everything I do, I get like, watch, here it comes. Look at that.
There it is.
I didn't do anything.
Watching
The
you.
minute
It's
you
what
trigger
is
it,
watching me. We'll do AI next time. You're my new best friend, and you're Putin's former lover. So
Yes, I know.
you want a
I'm
mail
going
order
up.
brought.
I'm going up in the world because to be his lover is actually below your new best friend. So I'm going up in the world. I'm social climbing.
that's the bye-bye line.
And Rory, I know you're not Putin's lover.
No, never
Not
have
really.
been.
No,
Never
never
Used
have.
to be.
Never have.
Used to
Nope,
be.
said no. That was it. But
All
you
right,
are also
everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, he could ride on a bare chested. No, not into it.
We all are going to get bare chested on the next show, guys, but you have
Okay.
to tune in to see that. And follow Cary. Cary, give us all your handles as we get out of here. How can they follow you?
Good question. You go to Twitter at Cary Harrison, at Rethinking Heroes, which is sort of one of my main shows. Another one is called Reboot Your Life. But definitely follow all of them. Reboot Your Life, Rethinking Heroes, anything Cary Harrison, just Google it. And let's do this next Wednesday at 7 Eastern, which would be, because my math sucks, 4 Pacific?
Yes, 4.
Four
Yes,
Eastern,
we
or
did
4
it.
Pacific.
I calculated three numbers, real time, without using my hands because I'm holding them right here.
Do this to celebrate. Do that
Yes,
to
I'm going to
celebrate.
do Richard Nixon to celebrate. I want the balloons, though. The
AI
balloons.
doesn't
Is it
like it
this
when
way
you
I
make
got
fun of Dick Nixon.
Yeah, guys, go to David is asking so go to www.rethinkingheroes.com or www.goharrison.com, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, or what you could do is just go to any podcast platform from Spotify to Apple, Sirius XM, TuneIn, the whole soup, cat, and pizzas. Just put in Rethinking Heroes, or Reboot Your Life, one of the two. And this has been so much fun, you guys. Thank you for kicking me off the high dive and doing this. It's something I've been wanting to do, but without you two
On YouTube.
come on.
This is, you know what this is? This is the part
Still haven't found what I'm looking for.
I have to react to Cary over on this way, and then I react to Rory up there, and we do a lot of part. What is it? Brady Bunch.
Da-da-da-da-da.
So I have to say goodbye and good night because I have to run downstairs and neuter my cat. But
But
we will
not
do this-
yourself. But not
That's an
yourself.
evening.
No, I'm going to do it
That's an evening.
myself. I have a
Right there.
paring knife.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and a manual. So I'm not going to be clumsy about it.
They say it's easier if you grab their back of their neck in your mouth, so you're like their mom. I've seen videos about that.
Hey, good night, everybody.
They'll let you neuter them, no problem.
Till next week.